No, don't do it. Don't go in the cave. Nobody ever comes back. No. Hello, my fellow gnomes, and welcome to Tower Defense episode 16, where we're going to be working on some mobile controls, because at the moment we haven't got any support at all. So if we hit stop and we go over to the test tab here, we'll notice we have this little icon, device emulation. And if we click here, we get this magical little mobile phone. We can change it if we want. We're at an iPhone 7 at the moment, and we can sort of adjust it to fit the window, so it's a bit larger and we can see it. It doesn't matter too much, but that's a bit easier to see, isn't it? And then if we hit play, we're sort of in this emulated state, and I can move around with my keyboard, or I can use the mobile controls like I am touching with my fingers. And if I then click one of these buttons, that will work. But you'll notice I can't actually place this guy. I can move him around. Look, I can move my character around, and I can touch, but he's not going to get spawned in. So what's going on? Well, if we hit stop and exit out of this emulator and go into our starter GUI, into our game GUI, and look into that game controller script. Now we're going to have to scroll down and find where we set the input for that. There we go, it's down here in the input began event. Now we'll see we have this if statement here. It says checks if the input, that new input that just began, if it's a mouse button 1. So if they've clicked, and only if they've clicked, are we then going to try and spawn in a tower. Now if they're on mobile, they're not going to be clicking with their mouse button, but they're going to be touching. So we could add, we could change this to touch, for example, but that's going to create some other problems. For example, if we go back and play, turn that on and play, now what's going to happen is as soon as I click to add one, and then if I touch the screen again, say I want to walk, well, it's going to just place a tower down in that position. Because when you're on mobile, you haven't got any distinction between a sort of a tap to move the camera or something and a tap to actually place something down. Whereas with a mouse, we've sort of got hover states and so on. Well, everything is a touch on mobile, so we're going to need to be a bit more clever than that. There's a few approaches we could make. We could add buttons for everything, but I think what we're going to do is actually add a double tap functionality. So let's change this to back to mouse button 1, and then we can add a second condition just below it, and we'll say else if the input dot user input type equals enum dot user input type dot touch. So we'd attack if they have touched, and then we might want to do all of this again, but first we're going to need to actually check when they last tap the screen, because we want to have a double tap. Then we're going to need to measure the sort of the gap between those two different taps. So let's go right to the top, and with all of these variables here, we'll just add in another control variable, and we'll call this one last tap or last touch, and we're going to make that equal to tick. Now tick is the current time, as you see here, it's highlighted, the amount of time in seconds since the UNOC epoch. Right, so we get a big long list of numbers, and that's the amount of seconds, which will tell us the current time. And then down in our input began, we can compare that time with the current time that they have touched. So the local new variable time since last touch, and we'll make that equal to tick again. So the current time now, because that last touch variable we just created, that was just being set when the game first runs. So now I want to check every time they touch. I'm going to take away from that current time the time we last registered, so the last touch variable. And then we'll check what the difference is. So if time since last touch is, say, less than or equal to, let's try a quarter of a second, so 0.25. And if that's the case, then we're going to say that it's therefore, that's a double tap, and we're going to want to spawn in a tower. Now we could copy all of this and paste it down here like that. But that's a bit messy, really. We don't want to be repeating ourselves like that. So instead, let's delete that. And we'll select it all from here, and we're going to press Control X. So it'll cut it away. And then we're going to create a new function. Create a new function up here on line 214. And we'll call it local function spawn new tower. Like so. And then inside of there, we're going to paste in Control V, that code that we just cut. And then we can just call the name of this function rather than having to actually reuse all of this code. So take the name of that function, spawn new tower, and we're going to want to call it here for when the mouse button won't click. And we'll call it here for when it's a double tap. And after we have checked all this, we're going to need to reset the value of last touch again. So just below there, we'll say last touch now equals tick again. So it's going to keep checking every time. And just so we can see what's happening here, let's add in a little print statement as well. And we'll print out the value of time since last touch. So with all of that set, let's enable our output. There we go. And we'll go to play. Well, actually, let's make sure we're on test. Yep. And then we'll click play. And so now when I go to spawn in this slinger here, and I touch the screen, we'll notice some numbers start to appear in the output. If I zoom in a little bit there, so you can see the gap between each tap is about 0.5 seconds. But if I tap in quick succession, click, click, then it's going to spawn it in because it's only 0.1 of a difference between those two taps. Less than a quarter of a second, therefore we're registering it as a double tap. So there we go, we can spawn in these guys. Look, we can move around with them, no problem. And then if we want to spawn it, just double tap. And there we go, he's placed. Fantastic. So we didn't even have to bother using any buttons. Now, something we might want to do is actually have a button to remove him. Because at the moment, right, if we're trying to spawn one in, like so, and then we decide, oh, actually, I don't want to place this guy. I would just want to cancel it. Well, we've got no way of cancelling this placement, have we? We're kind of stuck with him until we spawn him. Let's hit stop, and we'll disable this emulator for a second. So into our game GUI, we'll add in a new frame, and let's make this size-wise 0.2 of the width, 0, 0.2 of the height as well, and 0. So we'll get a box this sort of size, and then we'll position it so it's right in the middle. So 0.4, 0, and 0.8 of the way down, so it's at the bottom like so. And then we'll just set this to be a transparent background, and we'll name this frame, we will name it controls. So if we wanted, we could put multiple buttons in here. You could have buttons to place it, maybe to rotate it and so on. But I think we're just going to have the one button. So we'll add in a text button right into there. And then we will name this button cancel. And its position, we want this to be in the middle. So we're going to set that to 0.5 of the way across. And we'll then set its anchor point to be 0.5 as well. 0.50, there we go. So everything is nicely lined up and centered. And then its size, we'll maybe set this to 0.8, 0.80, which is going to make it a strange shape like that. But if we want to ensure that it's square and also relative to this container size, what we can actually do is we can change the size constraint from relative XY to relative XX. Relative YY, sorry. And when we do that, it's going to be 104 studs in each direction. So it's nice and square. And maybe we don't want it to be square. Maybe we'd like it to be circular. And if we want to do that, we can add in a UI corner. And in here, if we set the corner radius, we see we've got these properties of scale and offset. Well, if we set the scale to 1, it's going to make it completely circular. And we can get rid of the offset, like so. And maybe we'd like to have a kind of icon rather than just having that boring text. So we'll add in a image label. We'll name this image label icon, and its size we'll set to be all of the width, 0, and then 0.8 of the height. So it's going to be something like that. So we've got a little gap at the bottom there where we can then put another text label. The text label we'll just call this name, and we'll position this to be 1 of the width, 0, 0.2 of the height, and 0. And make sure it's positioned to be 0.8 of the way down. So it's right at the bottom there. And then for our icon, we just need to grab an image for it. I've actually already got one I can use, so I'm just going to copy and paste that into it. And then make sure that you set the background transparency to 1. And this is actually a cross, so in order to see it, I'm going to need to change the image color. So if I change this to red, like so, there we go. I've got my red X for the icon's image. It's a little bit stretched at the minute, so I might just change the scale type to be fit. And there we go. That evens it out. And then for the text label, we'll make sure that this has a background transparency of 1 as well. We will change the font to Oswald because that's what we've used everywhere else. Make sure the text is scaled, and for the text we'll just type cancel. Like so. That's our... Hang on, is that font right? No, it's changed. So we want Oswald. There we go. And what else do we want? We want to make sure there isn't actually any text in the button label itself. So get rid of that text. And maybe we'll make the transparency of this to be 0.5. That looks a little bit nicer. We can probably make that text label a little bit bigger actually. Let's try making it 0.7 for that position. And then we'll make it 0.3 of the height, so a little bit taller. There we go. I think that looks a lot better. So that's our cancel button created. Now we can go into our script and edit it. And in fact, we don't really need to have this visible all the time. So we're only going to want to toggle its visibility from the script. So we'll set the visible to false, and then we'll enable that in our script. So where do we want to set the visibility to true? That's going to be whenever we are creating that placeholder. So if we scroll up to where we add in the placeholder tower, here we go. And all we're going to do is, after we've done everything else right at the bottom of this for loop, we're going to say GUI dot, and it's the controls frame, and we'll set the visibility of that equal to true. And then we're going to want to hide it again. So we can copy that line, and we'll find the remove placeholder tower function. And inside here at the very bottom, we can set this equal to false. There we go. So now if I hit play, we should see we don't have any button at all at the bottom. And then if I add in a slinger, I then have this button appear. And if I click it, nothing's going to happen. Right, but if I spawn in this guy, then that button's going to disappear again. So let's program that button now. All we're going to need to do is we're going to go down to where we've got all these other activated events. These are all our buttons. So at the top here, we'll say GUI.controls.cancel.activated, and we'll connect that to a function. Now, whereas with these ones, we created a new function like so, and then we wrote some more code inside here. We don't actually need to do that this time because we've already got a function that we can just call straight away, that remove placeholder tower function. So we don't need to create a new function. We can just call our existing one. So we just type remove placeholder tower, and it's just inside those brackets like so. So that's going to be connected now whenever they activate the cancel button. Let's try it. There we go. We have our slinger. And if we hit the cancel button, there we go. It's going to delete that model. We've not lost any money. We've still got our towers limit just as before. That's good. If we hit stop, and maybe we'd like to add in a little hotkey as well. So if we scroll down, remember we set up the R key to rotate. Well, how about we have another condition, else if the input.keycode equals enum.keycode, and we could set this to be X, right? X like to cross, right? To cancel, or maybe you'd like C for cancel. In fact, we could have both. Why not have both? So we could type or, and then copy this little bit here, paste that in, and change that to a C. So if they press X or a C, then we'll just call that remove placeholder tower function again. So now if I hit play, right, so I'm just on desktop this time, right, I can spawn one in. If I just tap C on my keyboard, it's going to disappear. Nice and easy. One more thing we need to do is actually set up our hovered states. Because at the moment, if we're testing on mobile, and if we spawn in a dude here, let's double click, spawn him in, and if I click away from him, I can't actually disable all the stats I brought up. So if I have two units like so, and I try and click on one of them to bring up the stats, right, to edit or upgrade them, I can't actually edit the other one. I can't select them. So in order to do that, all we need to do is we need to change this line right down here, because this is relying again on the mouse button 1 event. And it's just a case of saying or, and we'll copy this and paste that in here, or it's a touch, right? So if we'll check if there's a hovered instance and it's either a button click or it's a touch on the screen. And seeing as we're using a combination of an and an or, let's make sure that we wrap this in brackets, right? Sort of like BODMAS operation. So we're giving it priority. So we always need one of these or these and this. And while we're in here, let's move that print statement as well. We don't need that anymore. So now when we're hitting play, we should find we can spawn in our slinger dude and we can click away and it will disable all of that info. And if I went over here and added in a wizard, I can see his info. I can click on the slinger, bring up his info and go back to the wizard. So I got all my mobile controls working now. Fantastic. Let's hit stop again. I don't think there's anything else we need to change here, although I might just reorganize some of this code just a little bit, because we notice we've got this sort of this for loop awkwardly in the middle of our script. I don't really like to have code that just runs sort of hidden in the middle. I want to make it a little bit clearer. Now, what I might do is I might select all of this, Control X, so it's on our clipboard, and if we go up, we might remember we have this setup GUI function at the very top, which was sort of all the code we wanted to run at the very start. So right down here at the bottom, I'm just going to paste that in so it's inside of that function. And then I'm going to select all of this, including the line that calls it. So select this and all the function. Take all of this, Control X, and I'm going to put this right at the very bottom. So I feel like that's a bit more organized. So this is going to be the first thing that runs. And then above it, we've got our render step loop. We've got our input began. We've got all our different activated events for our buttons. And then we've got all our functions. So I think that keeps things just that little bit more organized. And while we're here, one thing I have noticed is some of these tower targeting is a little bit off. If we see, sometimes he doesn't always target the zombie that's at the front, even though he's targeting first. Now, sometimes you write some code and you come back to it and you think, why did I write this code? So if we go into the main and onto the tower server script, inside of our find target function, I'm not sure why I did this, but I added this little if statements here, where we reset the best distance values. If we can actually just go ahead and remove this and remove it from the last one as well. Remove this here too. And what we'll find is it actually works a lot better because it's not gonna reset the best distance each time. So now if I hit play again, you'll notice it actually works a lot better without that silly little if statement. Not really sure why I added that. There we go, add this back in, and it's always going to target the one at the front now, which is what we want. So there we go. There is episode 16 done and dusted. We've added support for our mobile controls. I think in the next episode, we're going to need to add some effects to make things a little bit more interesting. It's all a bit quiet and dull at the moment, isn't it? So there we go. That's episode 16. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this helpful, then why not leave a like and even consider subscribing. But until next time, goodbye!